I hope you can all see my slides now. If you can't see the slides and experience technical difficulties, then please let me know in the chat. My colleagues will then take care of that. We have activated captions to make it barrier-free or reduce barriers to this webinar. And of course, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with you in the next few days, so there's no need to take frantic notes. Briefly about us, as I said, my name is Chris. I'm the Managing Director of MZ International. Together with my colleagues in all these countries here, we are here to build better non-performing non-profit organizations who are performing well. We secure funds, we develop smarter strategies, we build better organizational models and business systems, and all in an effort to strengthen those organizations that make a real difference in the world, which is the nonprofit organizations and impact organizations at large. We ourselves are, of course, a social enterprise as well. Now, enough about us. We're talking about 4 things here mainly today. Give you a brief overview about what we mean by the term merger, then what makes it successful, what makes it fail. And all that has started first, of course, with an overview, which we'll dive in straight away. Now, mergers are really active at the moment in the UK. We've got about 58 mergers involving 116 organizations in 1819. So we always have to work back on the figures that are reported a few years back, involving mostly small NGOs under £1 million sterling turnover. In the US, we had 112 mergers comprising 280 organizations. That's the early reporting from 2022 and 2023. So you can see by the numbers that there are 280 organizations involved in 112 mergers. So there's at least a fair chunk of mergers or joining up where there's more than 2 organizations involved. And that trend continues, where in Europe is even more. We have about 85 joinings or mergers or acquisitions involving 350 organizations, give or take. And that's often part of a change process. Been involved in quite a few of those, so we'll report back from those. That should be over 2024. Of course, we expected a substantial surge in EU and non-EU structural mergers as the EU eligibility funding rules are becoming ever more restricted to EU entities. We see that more and more non-EU entities start buying up, joining or merging with an EU entity to allow that funding stream to come up. Now, that's all well and good, and there's a lot of activity happening, but what do we actually mean by a merger? And you can sort of put them on an arc like I've put here, that is along the arc of possible mergers. And they are basically decided in their nature by how well financially the organization and how stable it is. At the top, we have what we always deem to be the case of a merger. We have this merger of equals at eye level, where 2 or 3 organizations join to do something together that they couldn't do alone, or at least do it better, have some synergies there. We'll talk about those in a minute. We also have a lot of new structure mergers, whereby a larger organization often invests or joins with the smaller organizations, and maybe not even fully, but only a part of it. So there's a part where they say we do advocacy together, for example, but we don't do fundraising together. These things do happen quite a lot as well. And then that's a partial merger, or they're designing a new structure. We have the merger of many, where a lot of member smaller organizations join together because there is sufficient overlap in their mandate. And then there's a good old straight over takeover, where, for example, a for-profit organization really would like to be associated very closely with an NGO, or the other way around, where the NGO says we need to start or acquire a for-profit organizations to leverage our impact, for example, for blended finance investing or blended finance impact management. We have that as well. Then the last 2 are sort of less positive, even though they're green. Maybe we should change that. There's asset transfer, where an organization is basically derelict, but there's a few nice, good assets. And in terms of assets, could also mean practicalities or policies and or copyrights that the other organization would like to acquire. And then there is the spin-off and die well, where an organization can no longer fund its own mission or its own organization. There's no prospect of doing so in the medium or long term. So, but rather than completely going bankrupt, they say, look, we're winding this down and we're merging the parts that should continue to live on into another organization. And that is by and large this, the sort of categories of merger that we're referring to. Of course, in reality, they are often a mixed bag of two or more of these opportunities, but it helps categorizing them in some of this. Now, there are a few things that we should know about mergers. Most mergers that are takeovers, so that bottom part of this here, or they happen motivated out of the financial trouble by one party, they really tend to fail. They tend to fail to materialize the also mentioned synergies that are often overpronounced in advance. They are often motivated by some sort of face-saving motivation, or by a gesture of goodwill, so of the organization taking over a small organization or a financially distressed organization. Now, unsurprisingly, with that motivation, most fail to deliver the cost saving or the synergies that they are trumped up to be. What works better, however, are these, what I call these change mergers. So that we're talking about the top three here. They are often tend to work because it allows them to move into a new sector, either thematically or into a new income market. So what I mentioned earlier, for example, a US organization teaming up with a European organization to access both grant modules, grant markets properly. They can also sometimes expand into new geography, or change the structure of an NGO to access completely new sources of financing. For example, NGOs are typically built to acquire and manage grants, but maybe the impact theory of change points towards a blended finance module that cannot be hosted and acquired within the NGO model. So there we go, this is the change model, and they tend to work a lot better as well, because I think the motivation is clearer. So the key question that you'd like to address if you even start thinking about it to make this webinar practical is in which instance, on which area does 1 + 1 = 3? You know, ask yourself very clearly, what can we only do together? On what can we save on together only? And I think the answers to these relatively simple questions need to be extremely clear before one even entertains and goes into the notion of a merger. I think the pre-merger time is critically important. I strongly advise to get a cool set of eyes on it, someone who's not just employed for due diligence on either side, but really pinpoints down the motivation of this merger going ahead, because that's ultimately the source of failure or limited success 6 months on when this is done. So let's have a quick look at these key success factors of a merger in our view. And this list isn't exhaustive, but it is the sort of things that we have seen over the last 10 years. And the synergies really only materialize if there's a clear leadership to overcome cultural and strategic mess and mesh, or mesh and mess. So where organizations merge, there needs to be a very strong leadership to overcome that cultural and strategic mess, even if the strategic plan of the other organization is formally no longer existent. Most people feel emotionally tied to it. Many people have joined the organizations for their strategy and what they want to do and want to be part of it, and a merger changes that. That human component of a merger needs to be very clearly managed and very clearly organized. The on the technical, on the financial side, there is an integration of processes and a strong financial expertise required to really quickly take advantage of this increased scale or depth. Very often, you see CEOs arguing this to their board, saying these benefits are coming over years to come, and then the performance is somewhat underwhelming in the years to come. So the consensus amongst my colleagues is that, if these financial and process integration advantages are materializing at a decent pace and aren't defined clearly in advance, then the effect of them occurring to any material degree at all is probably quite low. So that's why we say, by and large, the financial benefits of this should start rolling in within sort of 6 months. You can reduce costs by eliminating double functions of the back office, by program delivery, or you can leverage the fundraising brand usage, so merging your reach and your increased income. And that is another piece of clarity that needs to be created before even going ahead, which is where we're also clearly seen in the mergers that the vast majority of those had a lot of independent advice and evaluation and training, in fact. So here are the things that would make it a failure, coming almost to the last part of this webinar. The merger itself can also be the purpose of the merger. If that happens, then the merger will likely fail. If the strategic goal of a organization is to merge with another organization rather than to do something with that increased capacity or with that increased scale, then you just end up consuming a lot of time, and because you're working on the end in itself. So the merger, again, very simple, should achieve something greater than the merged organization in and of itself, even though in the day-to-day management of the merger, it might not feel like it. It's usually a failure when it's done from a position of weakness, so out of financial distress. So if you have been taken over, a takeover that is sold as a merger in a face-saving language gesture, that usually doesn't achieve the promises of cost savings or additional income or reach or impact or advocacy leverage that are being promised in advance. The devil here as well, the third point, is really in the detail. These silos and these double structures, they happen a lot, and they become entrenched and extremely costly to break open every day. So where we have a strong organization with even stronger department and team structures internally, then asking yourself how these will be affected by the merger. Do they need to be affected? And do we possibly need to break them open or change the culture there? So the soft skill, the human element, is critically important. And doing a bit of a risk analysis in advance of the merger on that human element is absolutely critical. So that we do not have a culture of trust, a distrust, and a cultural mismatch. And here again, I want to say that these culture and trust issues, they are really not helping themselves by being managed by hesitant leadership, trying to govern too much by consensus. If the decision is to acquire, to merge, or to move an organization, or in fact change it in any material degree, then leadership should not be blind to changing circumstances, but certainly, move ahead with this full on and not hesitate about it. Hesitant leadership, an apologetic one, doesn't help here and actually defeats the purpose. So getting it right. We've gotten this down to 4-1. Where a merger or an acquisition is a good tool to expand reach, to expand income sources, or to eliminate cost structures. Those things can be quantified, they can be timed, they can be milestone and planned for when to achieve them. The better and clearer that is done, the more clear the target of what everybody is working to is becoming, the better it will get. The merger search, that's also what I mentioned just before. It's one of the best ways to access EU funding is to be in the EU. So merging with an organization there overcomes these new startup problems quite significantly. And then focusing on the money seems like an obvious one, but these savings and the income need to be materialized in a relatively short amount of time. In a few months, certainly within the first year, they need to start coming in. And really focusing, quantifying, and communicating that makes a big difference also to how the merchant will feel. And finally, once you've announced that we're doing this, get it done. A protracted merger with lots of follow-up restructuring, this just erodes confidence and erodes buy-in. It feels like another restructuring on the back of another restructuring, on the back of another restructuring. So really taking the time in advance, announcing, and then doing it and ripping the plaster off is essential to get it right in order to give security to not just your staff and your customers and your beneficiaries, but your donors and to the external world as well. Good. How am I doing on time-wise? Am I all right? Yes, I am all right. That's 20 minutes, exactly what I should be spending on this. So if there are any questions, please put them in the Q&A right now. I've got 2 announcements to make. We have launched our brand new online training courses now in our attempt to help local organizations. We're starting with 2 courses, writing winning proposals and building sustainable income and financial reserves. Those are self-paced hybrid with live sessions at a significantly lower rate than an in-person training. And I hope you avail yourself of these. And finally, of course, the in-person training courses on these topics happening all over the world. The next one in Berlin, London, and even in Washington later this year. Good. I'm going to switch off. Oh, so here are my contact details. You will get the slides or a link to the slides soon. If you've got a question on that one, you can also email me directly, and then I'll get back to you within just a few days. And finally, we've got a webinar on the 5th of June around financial turnaround. Should you or someone you know find yourself in the unlucky situation of being in a financially distressed nonprofit organization, then hopefully you pick up some time at this webinar here. Please register through the website. Good. Let's have a look. The first question answered even before we started was how the endowment funds handled in a merger of NGOs or other NGOs. Just for clarity, I would love to hear from which country you are asking this question, because that depends on the answer. Just to let everybody know, an endowment fund is an invested fund whose proceeds go to the charitable or the impact purpose. So the principal capital stays in the investment, and the proceeds of that fund, something all along, happens a lot in education, training, and some NGOs as well. It depends on the owner of the endowment fund, is the short answer. So the endowment fund can be a special purpose vehicles, can be a fund that is external to the organization and by contractual relationship feeds its proceeds into the NGO. Sometimes the endowment fund is owned by the NGO, sometimes the endowment is managed by an external. So it really hard to say. It depends on where the entity holding the endowment fund is being handled. If one organization has a sizable endowment fund and the other one doesn't, then that might actually be the motivation for the merger from the one who doesn't. Then very clear language needs to be developed in the contract and communicated in the management about what to do about the proceeds and how this is handled. Bear in mind one last thing: the endowment fund will likely have fund management rules themselves, whereby what sort of mission they are doing. If you're changing that as a result of the merger, then there could, of course, be a major problem. So you may want to be very clear about that in advance. If you want to have any more information about this, Amsterdam and my colleagues have been working on establishing and managing endowment funds for a number of years now, for 10 years plus. So happily provide you with a case study or 2 if you email me. Phil, lovely to see you at one of our webinars again. Really appreciate you being a regular guest here. Succession planning, a good reason for considering a merger. Phil, I would say absolutely not, categorically not. I mean, that would seem to me as a really weak motivation of the merger, it is a lot easier to hire someone than to merge with another organization. Of course, if the person you're trying to get in has their own organization and you just need to buy that organization to get the person in, and that organization has complementary services, then that is a different thing. But then it needs to be a really small organization. You can't, merge and change the structure of your organization fully just to get a good hire in or out. So hopefully that helps. It's a bit of a worrying question, actually. Love to know some background there. Someone else asked, what if we are already along the merge process and getting it wrong based on what you shared? First of all, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't trigger you, or I didn't worry about you. Depending on where you are in the merge process, pre-announcement, post-announcement, has the paperwork been drawn up? Have you decided this? Then getting professional assistance in is really essential. You need that cool set of eyes with all options open. Hopefully, if the benefits and the motivation of the merger is still valid, those can be salvaged. The earlier you react there, the better. And again, getting someone, and even just getting the additional resource in to deal with the merger, not having to do this next to your day job, would be my first advice here. Once again, I hope I didn't ruin your afternoon by triggering you and now seeing your merger as a failure in progress. And are there any successful mergers from the sector? Yes, of course there are. There are plenty of successful advancements. We always type of confidentiality rules. We have to be a bit careful here, but we've seen lots and lots of mergers, for example, where organizations outside the EU are merging with an organization inside the EU, as I mentioned, to access this grant market, and those have worked in generally very well. Also, and I think the reason they work generally quite well is because their motivation is extremely clear. We've also seen lots of merger where they like to geographically expand into a new country or along the impact creation chain into an area. So most common example, we dealt with a agriculture based NGO recently who merged with a consulting firm in the agribusiness, so in profit and non-profit. They got together structurally in a new entity in order to advise the supply chain of these agribusinesses, and that is really leveraging the impact that the farming NGO, the agriculture NGO can have. There the motivation is very clear. I think what they all have in common is that the motivation why to merge and the KPIs as to when this constitutes a success are very, very clear. Good. That's, I think, all the questions and I have here, in which case, I hope you found that useful. We are supposed to not go over half an hour. We've got 4 minutes left, so we are doing all right time-wise for the first time. Finally, please do join us. I forgot to announce on the 19th of June, just under a month's time, where we provide an introduction to impact investment for NGOs, which you might find useful if you want to see if that or manage your impact investments better, or see if a blended impact module would be a better way for you to deliver your impact in this fast-changing world. Wonderful. I thank you very much for dialing in. As I said, the slides and the recording will be over in your inbox in the next few days. Thank you very much for so many questions and so many people attending this webinar. I appreciate it a lot. If you have a question that you couldn't share here today, please feel free to email me. Here's my email address again, or contact us via the website. My colleagues will get back to you or me directly. And I thank you very much for all the good work you're doing. I wish you a wonderful, healthy, and happy day. Goodbye for now.